Round 9 up for assessment. What did it all mean? That's why we have David King here on a Monday. The means test is for Jameson whiskey, triple distilled, twice as smooth, one of a kind. Hello, dear Kingy.
Hello, G. How are you?
I'm well. We have two.
Thanks for looking after last week for me.
No worries. Derm did a great job in your absence. We've got two full rounds of footy left before we start to hit the interruptions of the buys. So we'll revisit our brackets after round 11. It's a really interesting bracketing exercise right now. Give me a King's Gambit to start with before we go straight to Carlton.
You fool no one. So when you lack 100% buy-in or you're sub 100% invested, so there's only two measures. You're either 100% or you're not. There's no measures underneath that. We see it. The fans are passionate and rusted on. The media are tracking footy like they've never done before. So when you're not there, we see it. So I look at the players and the teams that are struggling, and you say, do you absolutely have that next level buy-in, the one that can win you games even if you're not good enough, the one that can keep you in games for long periods even if you're not talented enough? And there's many ways to win games of footy. But buy-in is the number one way to win a game of footy, and the number one way to separate close games or games that just need an impact or two from one or two players with that absolute buy-in. And I'll get to those players in a minute. But West Coast have got more to give. They got more to give. I know they're down on talent, but they've got more to give than what they're showing us. North Melbourne, and this is a problem because their leaders have got more to give. A massive issue. So those that are following the leaders, they see comfortable, and they think comfortable is AFL footy. They got so much more to give, and we're not going to accept less than 100%. The Sydney Swans trump card mids and star factor players are living a lie. They're toe in the water at the moment. They have got more to give. So I think you've got to hold all accountable, and when I look at some of them are short-term issues. Like Essendon defensively, their mids mainly, they've got more to give. They're not 100% in when the opposition get the footy. But that's a short-term thing. St Kilda had a poor day on the weekend, didn't really engage in the work rate that the Crows did. So they'll be better than that, and they have been better than that. So we're not looking at that. They could be one-offs, but you've got to stamp it out. You can't accept. As soon as you let it in, it's either correction before infection. It gets inside your club and you can't get it out.
Yep.
Or it takes weeks to get out. So that's the coach's role, to ensure the players bring that investment and you reward that through selection. You get the opportunity to represent this football club if you do this. If you don't do this, there's no anger there. There's no point spraying players. It's, hey, listen, you're not meeting the levels. So back you go. And do your 2 weeks in the twos, and when you're ready to apply yourself like the next player in, then you get your opportunity. But you forego your spot in the 23. And I don't care what stripes you've got on your shoulders. I don't care if you're a Hall of Famer. If you're not living the intensity levels and the application levels of the rest, you're out. So that's the coach's role, to ensure effort and buy-in and investment and make sure that's a non-negotiable, that you don't have to discuss that. You shouldn't have to bring that up as a coach. That's like a tradie going to work without his tools. Like, fantastic that you're here, but you can't do stuff all for us. Like, there's no point in that. So I watch Melbourne play, right? If you want to look at the opposite, every time I watch Melbourne play, I see Oliver, Petrarca and Viney going 100% at every opportunity, at every ball, at every clearance, at every tackle, and it's just relentless. And I look at the rest of the group, and they get swept along. It's like the jet boat in the wake. You just take everyone with you. They're all following. So give the fans something they can be proud of. And I got a lot of text messages last night with the kangaroo stuff, and all of them 100% accurate. They're hurting as a fan base, and the West Coast would be too. The Sydney Swans would be too. They're hurting because they've got more to give, and that's a really disappointing thing to say about those players. But they've got to own it, and the club have got to. And you don't bash it out of players. You just take away the reward of senior footy.
That's the best King's Gambit so far this year. And that will resonate so
Well,
strongly.
Pretty bad
with
year,
people.
Gerard, but I'm just trying to bounce it round 10, 9.
That's excellent. And that will appeal to the way people watch footy. You're fooling no one. You can see that stuff.
Yeah. So how proud are you of your team? I guess it's not relevant where you are on the AFL table. I'm a North Melbourne supporter, okay? And I don't care if they win 6 games, 8 games, 10 games, 2 games. I don't care, but make me proud of the effort. And that's why I love Jack Ziebell as a player, right? Jack Ziebell's closer to the end than the start. But when the ball's in dispute, he will sacrifice a rib to break even in a contest. He will. That's just how he plays. And I'd say, oh, mate, good on you. You know, you're not going to win the game for us, but by God, you're going to set some standards. Everyone's got one of those players in their team. So it's not about winning. It's about making us proud because we wait all week to watch you for 2 hours. We do. That's the passion of the fan. And when you serve up 2 hours of half-hearted rubbish, we go, you know what? I don't know about this player. I don't know about this guy. And we have to wait another week to see whether it corrects. So it's important to us. So they've got to deliver.
Correction before infection tied in there as well. All right, let's get straight to the pressure index. Well, I'll shuffle the order around. The pressure index is Carlton. They're living here at the moment. So put a bit of meaning into this. So you've heard the passion while you've been sitting outside the studio. Give us a bit of meaning in where Carlton is right now.
Well, can we just say that they ran into a pretty good team on the weekend?
Yeah, and that's why the Dogs are going to be in PFI.
Yeah, they would have won. They would have beaten a lot of teams playing at that level on the weekend, and Libba went to work and ripped their heart out late, and they just had the answers, the Dogs. So credit to, I think you got to start there. So I think Carlton fans are going too hard this week. Okay, if that was a performance like that and they let a game slip against a subpar opponent, then I would be with them. But let's look at what Michael Voss has got to work with. Okay, this is why he's not cutting his nose off despite his faith. I didn't like the use of Curnow on the way. I'm a believer that you have your players play the roles and then you challenge them on performance. Curnow is their goal kicker. He's a forward 50 player for me. So that's his function in this team. So if you want to move him outside of that function, you want a bloody good reason. And you want to make sure that it brings 4 or 5 goals with that next role. Okay, Harry McKay, he's not performing his function at the moment. So his role is not being delivered upon. So maybe you do search for an answer there. Time in the ruck, time at centre half forward, work up the ground, Harry. Be our exit player when we come out at 50. But I'm looking at others. So they've got to get De Koning in this team. They've got to find a spot for him because he's too good to not be in this team. And I know he's been out with concussion or whatever at the next level down. But as soon as he's ready to go, he's in. Do they get the most out of Mitch McGovern? Now, I notionally like the idea of him as a halfback flank intercepting player, but 18 intercepts in 4 weeks, 10 score involvements in 4 weeks. Can you get more out of that player? Can you throw him to half forward and say to Jack Silvani, listen, we're going to have to find another role for you because that role you're playing, we think we can get more out of another option. Have a look at it. De Koning to centre half back, free up Wiedering, tell him to become Jake Lever. We need more out of you. He's an interesting discussion, Jake Lever. Jacob Wiedering, because he's above average one-on-one, and he's above average with spoils, but he's average with intercepts. And he's just a good average key position defender. Well, he's better than that. He's a pick one. He's a leader of this football club that they've got to make a marquee player. So if you put a lesser player next to him, he can support as often. The intercept defenders go where the ball goes. So it doesn't matter who's there. It doesn't matter what the matchups are. They'll turn up. So I look at that and I say there's opportunity there. They've got no forward half pressure game at the moment. And this is roll. So if you're going to pick Durden, Owies, Motlop, Silvani as you're pressuring Smalls, they've got to bloody deliver. And if they don't deliver, you get no lock-in. You become bottom six, I should say, for forward half intercepts. You become bottom 6 for scoreboard return, which is exactly where they are the last month of footy. So all you need to do is sit down and say, right, who's delivering on their role? Are you? Yes. Are you? Yes. Are you? No. Okay. Position up for grabs. Are you still our best option? And just work through like that. There's no anger in it. This is a performance industry. So Vossi knows, doesn't have to walk in and spray Harry Mackay. You're not delivering. How do we correct you? Is it all goal kicking? I don't think it's all goal kicking. But I'm just getting sick of the discussion where Charlie gets bracketed with Harry and all of a sudden Charlie's 80 from goal. And even if he wins it, he kicks it to Harry who can't kick a goal. So what's the point of that? You're losing twice. So I'm looking at the roles being met at Carlton, and they sort of are mid-table met. But mid-table met's not what they want to be delivering this year. It's not all broken, but there's some work to be done, and I would be starting with the guys that can seriously impact, like McGovern, Wiedering, get Mackay out of the way, keep Charlie close to goal, and then I'll be saying to Precious Smalls, hey, listen, you're all on notice. We only picked 3 of the 4, and you guys are going to fight. It's great to have one in the reserves, nipping at the heels. It's great to have a midfielder that doesn't get shunted to a half-forward flank or a half-back flank. He's in the reserves because you're not in our first 7 midfielders or 8 midfielders. Don't be afraid of leaving a couple out.
Yep.
So that's where I sit with Carlton. I'm still okay with Carlton. I think they'll be okay.
They're living in the pressure index at the moment. Self-immolation is the risk for the Blues right now. David King, the big issue is clearly the Swans. Grand finalists last year. Did I ever tell you? I'm just not sure about the Swans.
A bit early.
The grand finalists who suffered heavy defeat over 15 years. Port Adelaide sunk without a trace. Adelaide, that's the demise when they lose that grand final, and now we're starting to see them again. The Giants missed the finals. The Bulldogs last year staggered all year, just clung on. Sydney are a long way back. So my measure with you was had to be better than 3 wins after 9 rounds to be in it, and Sydney are now the wrong side of that moat for me.
It's a hard one to work out what's gone wrong with Sydney. Now, the easy fingernail deep, to use a Ross-ism, is to say, okay, no Rampy, no McCartans, and that brings a trauma.
And they are getting hurt by tall forwards.
Yeah. But they're getting hurt more by their lack of midfield influence, where they cannot win clearance, they cannot win contests. And what happens then if you go into an undersized backline or a lesser talented matchups, if you like, and you leak more than you normally do. Okay, so their numbers are distorted a little bit because they can't win contests in the back half, but they're conceding 104 points a week the last 4 weeks. There's only 2 teams worse than that, and I think you know who those 2 teams are. North Melbourne and West Coast. Their stoppage game is 17th in the competition. They're only getting 18 points offensively. So that's nothing to do with the back six. So when they win it, they haven't got the quality or the punish or the power. Now some will say, but they're kicking it to Franklin. That's fingernail deep. Good midfielders make good decisions. They break in a better space. They go the handball when they should. They kick when they should. And they play with power and precision. So this is a problem. 20-9 centre bounce clearances on the weekend. That's nothing to do with the back six. That's not Dane Rampy. That's not the McCartans. So I'm looking at their mids, and they are so erratic. We talked about them last Wednesday night. Their good is very good, but then the next game they can hardly touch the ball or hardly impact with the footy. So John Longmire's got a problem as to which ones to endorse week to week, because you just don't know what they're going to bring. So that, to me, that's the issue. And we touched on at the start of the show, the 100% application week in, week out, contest in, contest out. It's not there. Now, does a grand final do that to you? A loss like that? Potentially. But how come you can have great games in the first 9 weeks and then, be so erratic? So I don't have the answer. None of us do. And I think John Longmire's scratching his head at the moment. He's thinking, okay, what is, are we going to get good Warner this week or bad Warner? Am I getting a good Parker or a bad Parker? Mills was a loss on the weekend. Goulden was terrific. But then you see other weeks of Goulden, you go, yeah, okay, no worries. So that's the problem. They're bringing such an inconsistent application and output that you can't bank on them.
Had 2 soft kills at the start of the year, which I feel like we held judgment on. And then the stretch since, the only game they've won was Richmond. Both teams were horrendously undermanned at Adelaide Oval, and Sydney had the better of that night. But other games they've coughed up, games at the SCG against Port Adelaide and the Giants, which when the sums are done are going to be hugely costly. And they were really only, after quarter time on Saturday, they were really only sort of special effort against the Tide. 10 minutes here to hold the Tide back. Now, the Buddy conversation clearly gets tied into this now as well, but Amati's long-term injured, McDonald is now going to miss, and McLean's just not good enough. So he plays. There are 2 different conversations. He's not keeping anyone out of a team. And yes, he's played 1 year too long. I never get squeamish about that with champions. This won't be a defining period in his career. I like Joey Montagna had the idea last night around trying to take the air out of it by creating the farewell lap, which St Kilda did spectacularly with Lenny Hayes. Good idea. I'm never squeamish in these moments. He had that weird where he played onto the top of the goal square and in his 8th game he wouldn't have done that. But here he is in his, whatever it was, 348th doing it. And the ball in the last quarter that he just couldn't get down to anymore. So that's an aging legend in front of us. I'm never squeamish about that.
I kind of love that the champions play 1 year too many, because they might just bring 4 or 5 good games, very good games to the table, and you say, oh, there it is. We're going to miss him. So let's just embrace what he's been and what he may show us in 10-minute windows for the back half of this season. I'm absolutely with Joey in terms of let's be positive with this. Let's say, okay, we've got the road show. Remember the Sheedy Herd finale?
Oh, yeah.
I thought that was terrific.
Yep.
So I think that finished in Western Australia from memory. So he's got opportunities. He's going to Adelaide. He's going to Brisbane. He's going to Perth. So let's make sure that it's super and that it's the fans can go and say thanks, because there's not going to be a lot of other reason to go to the Sydney Swans games for some of those opportunities. So no, I'm in awe of Lance Franklin, and he's a football lover. I don't want him to have a bad experience on the way out. I want him to stay involved in the game in some way, shape or form, whether it's as an ambassador in the northern states or part of the media, or he loves footy.
Yeah.
He talks about the kids that are being drafted, and he talks about the kids that have just turned up, how he rates them and ranks them, and he drives the recruiters insane. He drives John Longmire mad about footy. So he's a footy nuffy, which I love. So let's not bash that out of him. Let's make sure that he has a great experience on the way out.
Metaphorically carry him off on our shoulders at the end. Like I could imagine in round 17 against Richmond at the MCG, I reckon the Richmond fans could absolutely be entrusted with this. This is the last moment on the MCG for Buddy. It's in your hands. Let's make this something.
So let's get back to just the footy stuff, right? There's nothing wrong with Buddy bringing the ball to ground, right? So if Buddy gets the ball to ground, so maybe that's Jack Riewoldt-esque, right?
Yep.
They're very similar. Jack can't do what he once could, but he's still finding a way to conjure up a couple of... He got smashed by Asava on the weekend, right? But he still finds a way to get 2 goals. He still finds a way to bring that ball to ground and to tap it here and tap it there. If Buddy could look at Jack and say, well, maybe I've got to be Jack for, the last half of 23. And then you look at Papley and you say, mate, you get to the fore of this ball every time. And those small forwards, Hayward, Heaney, mate, you're not doing it at the moment. So I'm going to bring the ball to ground and let you guys go to work. But, boy, we need to be brilliant at ground level. And if he catches one every now and then, well, absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. PFI, preliminary final integrity. So early in the year, the Dogs were in the pressure index. They met that challenge in round 3 when they beat the Brisbane Lions, and they have built their season since then. They're 6 from 7. The only game they lost was against Port Adelaide in the wet, where they led in the last quarter. And this goes to your question of who is the best player in the competition over the past 4 weeks. If you narrow it down to midfielders, because that's where the game lives. If you went Bontempelli, you missed by 1, because the answer is...
Libba, which is terrific, isn't it? And you look across the course of the season, Bont's number 1, Libba's number 2, English is number 5 in the competition. So that sort of snuck up on me a little bit. I knew that English was having a good year. He does it in different ways. But for Libba to be back and this player. So I keep looking at the Dogs and asking the question, are they better after Dunkley's exit? Now, you can have a win-win. So we're not denigrating the fact that he's not there.
Yep.
But what it's done, it's challenged Bont to be a better clearance player, and it's given Libba opportunity. I mean, last year he was playing half forward start of the year. And the coach said, no, I've got better options. So he's regenerated. He's a killer, Gerard. I would love to play with Libba on and off field because I just think he brings an energy and he brings a passion, which we'll talk about at the start of the show, that's all consuming and drags others along. Like you got Artie Jones trying to match Libba's intensity. Yeah, that's because you see it. You've got to match it. So what he's doing is quite brilliant.
I thought the see it, match it was there. So Bontempelli's had those games this season. Hey, we're not walking off this field without victory.
Yeah.
And then in the last 10 minutes, he didn't have to do it this time.
No.
That they embodied almost that mantra that he'd given them. They'd watched him do it, and other players rose to meet. We would have totally forgiven the Bulldogs if they'd got overrun at the end there. They'd been on the road 3 out of 4. They'd played some really grueling footy in tough conditions. They were playing against the team with that heightened emotional charge, and they'd led for most of the night. If they'd got rolled over by a goal or two at the end, we would have gone, yeah, that's the price of doing business. But no, they got headed twice. They stood against it. It was a different set of players.
Yeah.
I thought... I just think that tells you everything you need to know about the Bulldogs this year.
So I'm looking for differences, okay? So Bailey Smith, he's not, to me, he's not like, how do I word this and not be disrespectful? I don't think he's ahead of the game with his footy IQ, okay? So the coaches had to find other ways to make him or to work to his attributes. So on the weekend, it was quite regular for him to start toe-to-toe with Patrick Cripps and then work off him, particularly early. You look at a couple of those early counterpunches from the defensive half at stoppage, and he'd just go. He was significant. I haven't seen him swing too many games lately, and on the weekend he did. You know, I know he had a glut of possession, but it wasn't about the possessions. It was about the contested possessions. I haven't seen him get that many. He was in at centre bounces. His breakaway speed, given the fact that Treloar wasn't there, they needed someone to be that guy, and it was him. So I thought the use of Smith was really clever. They've just got the right pieces in the right holes again, haven't they? Like Johannisen, his kicking at the moment is just first rate. They bit off corridor regularly early, didn't get the reward in the forward half, but you know the dogs played with that passion, even though the scoreboard wasn't ticking over. It didn't have to be Bont, which is the first time in a long time we've said that.
Yep. They are in the conversation for the top 4, and so they should be. That's their measure this year at 0 and 2. It didn't look like they were going to be that team, and they have put it together well.
That's a good question from 831 here. Who would you rather have, Jack Viney or Libba? They're very similar players. That's a good. They're the sort of guys you need, aren't they?
Yep.
Yeah. Good. That's a good bit of feedback.
Who's the leading small forward? What was it? Half forward, small forward of the past 4 weeks. So I got this on the second go.
You
did. So I would have had him for 2 weeks, but I didn't have him the 2 week. Shea Bolton had been driving me mad this year because he'd been playing 80% smart alecky and 20% core football. And he's changed. So these 2 weeks I've seen that, but there's a measure across 4 weeks.
Yeah, he's the number one small forward the last 4 weeks. And Dusty's, I think he's number 2. So that just shows you their game. I know there's a soft kill in there against the West Coast, so they can fatten the numbers. But if you
I just want to flag this. The curiosity was Richmond, incidentally, and that's where we are.
Sorry. So what are you trying to see when you see Richmond? What are you trying to? Last year before that, you see that run and gun, that forward handball, and what does it do to the opposition? So for the start of this year, they couldn't get that game going for whatever reason. They didn't have the balance right. And I think Damien Hardwick was evolving with this group. You You got two big balls coming in the midfield. It throws a few magnets elsewhere. Are they in the best spots to suit the Tigers? I don't know. I don't know if they were. So he's still learning about this team. So they're not the finished product yet. And we've seen Richmond just try and get to the bye in reasonable shape and then charge from there. So when you see them running and handballing, Martin versus Stewart. Stewart wants to attack the footy. He's a go-getter. He's a midfielder stuck at half-back, Gerard. He wants the footy in his hands. So they played him perfectly. He would come up and get leapfrogged time and time again by that forward handball. When the ball was kicked, Stewart would be able to play and would probably more often than not win that contest. So you had that battle going on and then the Asava versus Jack battle. So you had to get through two of the Cats defenders to get a score. That run and gun game was brilliant. And when the game stops, the tiny dancer, Shea Bolton, there's a lot of courage in taking that extra step with footy. When you're in traffic, to be able to change angle, change direction, put on a step, to get the cleaner shot at goal or to get the handball away, there's a fair bit of courage in that because you piss the supporters off when you get run down, Gerard. Yep. And that's what's living in your mind right now. Him getting run down or not providing the perfect handball exit.
Kick the goal man.
So the kick the goal man versus the courage, to get it done. When it works, we go, oh, he's a star, and when it fails, you go kick the goal man. So this is the test that these blokes put you to. But he's in ripping form. Bolton has a huge impact on this team.
Yep. So I think the curiosity with Richmond is, I felt this going in. Said it on Thursday. This was the perfect scenario, and the old timers rose to it. It was just so appealing for Richmond, and 4 for Martin, 3 for Cochin, 2 for Jack. Have they put the new platform in, or was that the one-off special? This is the last time against this team, and there's so much shared heritage and the emotion tied into that, which played out before us. So I have them as a curiosity off the back of what was. Like, if you're just a footy purist, that was the sort of game that puts a smile on your face. Oh, yeah. If you're not emotionally engaged with either of them.
9 of 16 goals from the defensive half. The handball receivers, Rioli, Bolton, Baker. I mean, that's exactly what you want. Dusty 9-score involvements. Their number one turnover game for the year, 65 points. I said that they're back after they punished the Eagles because you could just see it's more about the method than the rest. So look out. They're coming, Gerard.
We
think we can bounce back. It's a long season. If you make top 4, you're going to lose 7. So I don't think we're a team that goes for undefeated. We would have liked to have been better on a big stage. But we get to GWS next week. I think we've done a lot wrong. I think we've lost by a point and 6 points with a lot of challenges to personnel. So, I'm really quite buoyant and optimistic. We'll get back on the horse and get going. I mean, I've seen Brisbane come in and get smacked in the heat and, they're going okay. So I don't think it's about credits in the bank. I just think it's a long, arduous season. Quite optimistic about the group's character. But, talk's cheap. We'll get to find out next week. I think everyone's going to have a game where they don't play at their best and sometimes the opposition B. I'd like to think we've been pretty consistent. We'll give them a mulligan.
I love it when coaches call mulligan. It's one of my favourite things. The debate is for Syfe, smarter investing, backed by the pros. Download Syfe. Are you giving St Kilda a mulligan?
No, but I like the fact that Ross is. That's Ross's call. We can't give out mulligans, Gerard. But you got to learn. You got to learn about your team, and Ross is doing that. They're miles from the finished product, and we know there's a lot of talent to come back. But let's just talk about this game in isolation. The template has been laid out for all to see. If you take the switch away from St Kilda down back and restrict their uncontested marking game, because all they're doing is making the ground big again to then put speed and run on the game, and they try and puncture the opposition. So Matty Nick said, okay, well, we're not going to give you that first uncontested switch. We're going to take that off you. And then we're going to force you down the line. And then you've got to get through our intercepting defenders and our ruckman, who's become a serious player. And it worked perfectly. I think there's 78 marks, for the day. They normally average well over 100. So that's a template. So there's some challenges there. Better talent can fix those challenges. So they'll get some better players back. When you kick into Max King down the line, maybe it's not as much of a problem. But right now it is, because your running game has taken you to this point. But when you start the season so fast, everyone says, "Oh, we're going to have a look at St Kilda."
Yeah.
And this is where you land. So they're a victim of their own excellence, and this is just the next layer of becoming a seriously good side.
So they've got 2 to go before their bye. They've got the Giants away and Hawthorn at Marvel. So go out and win those 2. Take your mulligan, win those 2, and then it's the strategic part of it which becomes so interesting. Once you reveal yourself, okay, so we've got to put work into how we're going to beat them when we play them. Okay, so this is working. And this is the push and pull of a team on the rise, isn't it?
Yeah. And then when you are that team on the rise, having to unearth new ways to win games of football is a challenge. So they do A and B really well. Now can they find C and D? And when you've got A, B, C, and D, and then you're looking for more again. But they've only got a few strings to their bow at the moment. It's probably the easiest way to put it. They've got a lot out of wingmen sliding inside their forward 50, hitting the scoreboard. They've got a lot out of the small forwards marking the ball inside. Like Jack Higgins has had a terrific year, playing the right way. He's having a great year. But when you slow the ball down, force them down the line, you lose all of those plays. You lose the ability for small forwards to get to pinch forward. You lose the sliding women. So it's a learning phase that they were always going to have.
Yes. Yeah. I'm giving them a mulligan as long as they get to 8-3.
They'll drop one. They'll drop one you won't expect.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the discussion starts.
And they're not a top 4 team. Like I think they're a 6, 7, 8 in the finals equation, or they could end up being 9, 10. But and that's going to be a huge effort to be when we redo the brackets after 11. Is to be in the bracket they'll be in. Huge commendation.
So the question for the Saints fans is the bracket of this time next year.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's all we're looking at, isn't it? I don't think their list. Ross knows their list is not good enough. He's just finding out what he's got.
The debate for SIFE DIY investing, not your thing. Don't worry. SIFE has you covered with ready-made diversified orders. The other side of that equation, I want to do Adelaide. They got that right over a long period of time. So they say improvement is not linear. It looks linear for the Crows, the way they're putting it together, and there's a few who suffer by comparison with their builds. Well, they got that right, Adelaide, not just yesterday. They're making improvement look linear, David King.
The best thing they got right is the coach. Simple as that. So what Matty Nix has done, he's changed this team into a contest-winning team in general play. So when the ball leaves a clearance, they're not an elite clearance team. They're not, and I don't think they overinvest there. You won't see the big bull in their clearance setups, and that's bad luck for those that are on the list that are that style of player. They want the fleet of foot, guys that can turn up and outnumber, that can evacuate quick from traffic, and then put speed on the game. So if you look at their post clearance contest works, that's winning clearance in general play. It can be a 1-on-1, it can be a 2-on-1, it can be anything. They're plus 89 for the season. AFL number 1. That's more than just a little stripe on the shoulder. That's a full blown ranking. That one. That's coaching. So then what they do. So what that does is it makes your possession chains go longer, so you get more opportunity to score, and it stops the opposition going 5 possessions in a row. You're stopping them at 3, so they can't score. So to do that, you've got to have talent that can win one-on-ones, or you've got to have the ability to outnumber, which is via coaching. They've got both. So they've got contest winners in the forward half. Their forward 50 is a delight to watch, but they've done it so quickly. You know, we were just talking in the break. Like the acquisition of Dawson and Rankin has changed. It's changed the look of this list in totality. Now, I don't think they need too many more parts to this puzzle to become a premiership team.
On what timeline?
Well, let's just say they can grab one more free agent in at the end of season, or one more big signing at the end of this season or the end of next. I think they're only 2 years away from an opportunity, given what we see with the coaching and the build and the standards, and they're just a good footy club. Like you have a lot of trust in footy clubs that are just good footy clubs.
Yeah, it's interesting. They've been through a period where they haven't been. They
No.
haven't been,
Not under
for
Matty
all the
Nicks.
advantages they have in their own town, they haven't lived up to that for a long time.
But not under Matty Nicks.
No, and so this is the nature of the build, is take hold of it and go, we're going to take all of our pain now.
Yeah.
But we have been able to see it year on year on year. Like you think about how long it took him to win his first game and how painful that was, and they won 3. But they are now in that sweet spot, is you can see the improvement in every player and on every line. They have a style of play which is discernible, is dependable, doesn't mean they win, and they take a lot of beating. If you're going to beat them, they take some beating.
Best forward line in the competition this year. Yeah, best forward 50. I don't think many would have said that coming in.
Nope.
Okay, Rankin was going to add some spark, but Saligo's going to be a star. Rochelli's going to be a top liner. Michael Annie at half back. I mean, he'll be right up there in the rising star. Like, what's he going to become? Like, is he going to become a Ben Hart type defender? Like the Guy McKenna type defender that just takes all sizes and just outmarks them all the time? Like, I really am enjoying what they do with their midfield, but it still needs another star or two. I think they're easy to find. And they're going to have to open the purse strings a little bit. If Adelaide want to spend, they'll fast track this opportunity. With the new team coming in, it's going to be a great time to be good. It really will. So I don't know how long Tex can hang on for. That's the mystery. And
So I guess my question is, will they get into the premiership window while Tex is still there? And if he's not, are they covered for that? Because he's had 2 really good seasons.
Yeah. But it's sort of surprising, isn't it, that the more they stack the good seasons, the more you should just say they're going to have more good seasons.
Yeah.
Until you see it finish, it's starting to finish. Yeah, we've been saying this about Tom Hawkins for 5 years.
Yeah.
It just keeps rolling on.
Yep.
So who knows? I don't have the answer on that, but what I do know is they've got the right man at the helm. They've got a really solid, bankable footy club now that's growing standards, and they've got a system that is bloody hard to stop.
They got that right, Adelaide, over a long period of time. The open question is, are the bottom 3 ruining the competition? I want to engage in this conversation with you next, and then I think we'll delve just a little bit deeper on North Melbourne. You gave it in the King's Gambit, but just a little bit more. The open question is, are the bottom 3 ruining the competition? So North are 2 and 7, West Coast 1 and 8, Hawthorn 1 and 8. So my view is these are 3 different case studies rather than being a collective of uncompetitive teams. So Hawthorn are your stock standard bottom team. They have prioritised the future over the now. It's totally foreseeable coming into the season. But every second week, they'll make you beat them. So really good against but they made the Bulldogs beat them. Their second half against Melbourne had a bit about it, but it was over at quarter time. So for the neutral fan, there's not a lot in it. For the Hawthorn fans, I think there is. Stock standard bottom team. West Coast, just a historical anomaly. Now, 21 players on their injury list, nearly 2,000 games of experience. I suspect they're a bottom 5 team. With the injuries they've got, are just reduced to being uncompetitive. So we can make whatever sweeping assessments we like. But their games are a total anomaly at the moment, and just they're not worthy of watching, and they're not worthy of analysis. North Melbourne are the long-term problem that a team like, so whenever we get the worst since Fitzroy, so Port Adelaide with his team at one stage, Melbourne with his team for years on end, that's North Melbourne. Now, the problem for the comp is all 3 of those case studies are there at once, and it's going to skew who you're lucky enough to play twice with too many live kills. So I don't bracket them together, but the overall is there are too many live kills in the fixture.
Yeah. So what's the discussion you're trying to have really? Is it that they're ruining this season? Is it that they're ruining next season or the competition going forward? So I think Hawthorn are a headache right now. Take a couple of Panadol, Gerard. In 12 months' time, they'll be perfect. The other 2, one's a headache becoming a migraine, which is the West Coast Eagles. They're in awful trouble going forward with their list, and not just their injuries for the now, but their list going forward. And there'll be change at that footy club. And then you've got the migraine becoming the headache, which is the Kangaroos. And I still think you've got a coach that's just started 9 games ago, who's been under siege on all fronts. I think the club are still working out what their best footy looks like. They're erratic with their application because they're still learning new system. Everything's new. And thank God it is, because before that, it was awful. And we're going to have to live with some awful as a fan base. So one's a headache becoming a migraine, one's a migraine becoming a headache, and one's having 2 Panadol, and everything will be fine in 18 months.
Yep. And it is, when the maths are done at the end, if you're lucky enough to get them twice, it's going to inflate a couple of teams' wins and losses, and it may very well, because there are 3 rather than 2 or 1, it is going to play a role in who makes in our brackets. Is there a bit of bracket hopping based on who you played?
Yeah, but I don't think any of those teams are tanking.
No,
and we've had tanking discussions in the past, so we're nowhere near that.
No, I think those real conversations are a long time. That's more than a decade ago.
They were ugly conversations.
Yeah, they were.
I don't think these 3 teams are part of that ugly conversation. No. This is just happened, hasn't it?
It's better if you only have 2 bad teams, but this season we have 3 bad teams.
Yeah.
So it will skew things a little bit. So just one, the worst bit was North Melbourne.
Yeah.
So I know you touched on it at the start. Just take me a little bit deeper. So I think the worry is that there is a worry in the application. You're right. This is 9 games into a new regime. The way that they're playing doesn't fill you with they've all bought in with their hearts and minds yet. Fine, if they're totally committed and getting beaten by 10 goals, we all go, yeah, of course. They just don't look totally committed.
I've got not one problem with being not good enough. And not good enough is part of the AFL cycle. To come up against a better team happens regularly. And no one, you go to the footy saying, you know what, today we might not be good enough, but we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to have a go. They didn't have a go. They just didn't have a go. And I'm not going after the guys that have played 10, 12, 15, 20 games. I'm going after the leaders. You set the tone. Everything you do game day is watched by the lesser talent that are learning how to play AFL footy. What does it look like? If you play comfortable and half-hearted footy, it permeates into the group. So Luke McDonald and Jai Simpkin are new captains to this footy club, so I want to give them some time. And the way they play, they've got to understand, is so critical to setting the standard for the rest. This is why Ben Cunnington being horribly out of form is come at a really bad time. So he missed a bit of footy through illness and hasn't been able to recapture his best. The way he plays sets a standard for the footy club. So that's been unfortunate that his loss of form has come so quickly and leaves us here. Goldstein's not that sort of player. He's a great leader, but he's not that sort of player, that the Jack Viney type that says, come with me. So who is that player? I don't know who that player is. Is it Davies Uniacke? We got injured on the weekend, but he's been in and out of the team the last few weeks as well. So I think they just need their leaders to say, hey, listen, we are just going to be ruthless and uncompromising for the next 4 weeks. Let's just lock into the battle here, and to the maybe there's a personal cost to that you might not get as many touches and you might not kick as many goals, but every contest has a ferocity and an anger to it. The full forward doesn't bring that. Nick Larkey hasn't brought that anger that he has over the last few years. He hasn't. He's been just so in one-on-ones and hasn't fought the fight in those battles. He's been outnumbered in the years gone by, but not this year. So I'm looking at the leaders and I'm saying this is a club in your hands. So you either do it or you don't. So let's not talk about it. Let's have some action. And if you don't agree with it, go and watch the video again. Watch the game in a completely unbiased, neutral way. And if you think that's acceptable, then grab your bags and walk. Because this is a club that's done this for years. So don't put your hand up to be a leader if you can't be, is the simple answer. I think they've all got that in them. I know they've got that in them. But you can't talk about it and you can't say we once did it. You got to do it every time.
All right, I'm going to leave time for the seedings today because the three best teams in the comp haven't featured in the categories because of the nature of the games that they played. So we'll give our ringing endorsement of, in whatever order, Collingwood, Melbourne and Brisbane coming up next. North have just tweeted, Jai Simpkin is speaking on the criticism of the play. It hurts. I saw what David King says and I'll take that on board. It comes from a place of passion and love. He wants us to be better. When you look at the vision, it's not up to scratch. That's why Clarko was so frustrated on the day. Jai Simpkins speaking this morning. Get to our seedings for Tyre Power, tipping winners on tyre safety all season. I'll take some time with each of the top three. Who have you got at 4? I got a raffle at 4.
Well, in the words of Ross Lyon, I'm taking a mulligan at 4.
Right.
I don't know who to put it for.
I don't know whether to go Port, Geelong or the Bulldogs. I might go Port because they're in the 4 and they play Melbourne on Friday night, and giving them the chance to stack up to that game. So I might sit Port at 4.
You always do the play-in game.
Yeah.
That's a soft way out. I've worked you out.
They can bounce out if they...
I'm going to go with the Dogs.
Okay.
I'm going to go a different way to win on the weekend. And there's something about, I always say this, there's something about when you leave a club in trauma.
Yes.
If you can create a crisis, you're a good footy club.
All right. Who have you got at 3?
I've got Brisbane at 3 because... I love what their forward 50 represents, and it's not the best in the comp. It's the second best in the comp across the course of the season. But they don't let the ball out of there easy at the moment. In days gone by, it's been we score or they take the ball and they have their opportunity. A little bit of basketball, but their ability to lock the ball in the forward half at the moment is terrific, and that they're happy just to get it in now. It doesn't have to be precise. Remember, it used to be Charlie Cameron at full forward and you had to kick it to space so that he didn't get outmarked and then he could go to work. Now it's kick to Danaher. The big ruckman's getting forward, kick to Hipwood. Charlie's doing what Charlie's always done, but it's a more bankable model and it's allowing everyone to get to those ground balls. So I really love their spark forward 50 that's causing problems.
2?
Melbourne for me. You the same?
I've got Melbourne at 3 and Brisbane at 2. I moved Brisbane up to 2 last week. I actually really like them this year.
You really like them this year? Okay, I think you got the big 3, Oliver, Petrarca, Viney doing what they do. They don't rely on anyone really, but those 3 set the scene so brutally. The rest are following. So it's hard not to fall in love with Melbourne. And if I wasn't as much of a fan of Collingwood, like Collingwood is doing it a different way. They're at 1. They're doing everything a different way. Melbourne, if you're a traditionalist, should be your 1. But Collingwood are my 1 because of their ability to outnumber. They're winning despite an unbelievable injury list to 4 key players. So when Howe comes back, where does he play? Well, those sorts of, the bit of versatility that Craig's going to have. But the analytical people will love what Craig McRae's doing with the outnumber.
All right, so you're Collingwood 1, Melbourne 2, Brisbane 3.
Yep.
I'm Collingwood 1, Brisbane 2, Melbourne 3, and then Port's Choose Your Own Adventure. 4's Choose Your Own Adventure for a week.